Okay, so next we're going to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart as a Buchla fan. The cycling envelope, really, truly one of the greatest innovations in synthesis. The cycling envelope is basically a waveform generating function that has a trigger at the end of it that will cause it to restart that envelope again. So it's kind of like an LFO, but it has the ability to be shaped. Unlike an LFO where you would typically just choose shapes, the cycling envelope allows you to decide the shape of the wave and the speed of the cycling through the various function settings. Okay, so I'm going to do something really irritating, and I've had people complain about this. I find that when you are demonstrating a function like an LFO or an envelope, it's best to use it to control pitch. And why? Because the changes are super obvious with pitch, whereas if I were to do the cool thing and have it control the filter, it would merely sound cool, but it wouldn't be as clear what exactly is happening because we are better at sensing changes in frequency than we are sensing minor changes in harmonic content. Okay, so that's why I'm no fun at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cycling envelope and I'm going to have it control the pitch. Okay, so here's the cycling envelope. The first setting just says envelope, and then in that setting, it is not a cycling envelope, it's just an envelope, but it's a cool envelope because it has different functional shapes. It's like a simple envelope, and so if we set the beginning, of course we can see what we're setting here in the window. Set the beginning to 0, and then give it some sort of fall. We don't have any slope up, only a slope down. Of course, we can add a slope up. And so as you're hearing the pitch go up and down, you can imagine the pitch is like the filter cutoff point. If the filter cutoff point is super low, we're not going to hear anything. And then as it goes higher, it's going to open further and we're going to be able to hear more sound. Or, or amplitude, even for that matter. At 0, it's totally quiet. And then as we go up, it becomes more open, more sound is let through, the quote volume is higher. Anyway, so we have a rise, a fall, and a sustain, which in this case is added at the end. And we can see the standard envelope shape here. We can see an attack, a decay, the sustain part, which it's not really it's not really a time setting. It's more like a voltage setting. At what point is the, in this case, frequency held? Now we've reached the sustain and it's this frequency, and we could raise it. So we hear the rise frequency going up, we hear the fall frequency coming down, and then the sustain is where it is held as you hold the key. We can also see in this envelope this part after the sustain, which is the release. And if we had any release going, we'd be able to hear that happen too. So let's turn on some release over here in the amplitude envelope so we can hear what's happening in the cycling envelope. Okay, we've reached the sustain. I'm sustaining. Now when I let go, we'll be able to hear the release that is inherent in this, that is at the end of the fall. So we hear the frequency drop. Okay, so that is basically how the envelope function works in the cycling envelope, which means you have an envelope. You have two envelopes. You have this envelope, which is hardwired to the amp and can be directed using the matrix anywhere you would pretty much like. And then we have this other envelope, which we can also direct anywhere we like when it's on the envelope setting as an envelope. Something we might want to point out here, if you look at these two knobs, the rise and fall knobs, you can see there is shape in blue. When we see blue, it means that if we press the shift knob and then use the function, we have more functionality available. So basically, holding the shift allows you to set the shape of the rise and the shape of the fall. And you'll see when the image comes up that basically what you're doing is you're kind of giving it more of an exponential shape instead of just a linear shape, which is to say, instead of a straight line, you'll get kind of a curvature. Here, let's have a look. Okay, so you can see, let me give it a good rise so we can get a lot of view. Okay, so as I turn this, you can see it going from straight to curved. See if we can tell the difference. The linear one is more linear, and the exponential one has kind of a curve to it, has kind of a speed to it, if that is. And we can do the same for the back end. Let's turn the sustain down. Oh my gosh, that's going way up. So you have the ability to decide whether that is a linear or exponential shape when you're making the envelope, and that is super cool. Okay, so next we have run. Run is a cycling function, which means that when it has gone through its full envelope shape, it will then re-trigger itself and go back to the beginning. So let's hear that. You'll notice when I press a note, we're starting off in the hold section. So we can decide how fast this cycling goes by setting these different functions, the rise, fall, and the hold. So if we give them really short lengths, it goes faster. So the higher each setting we give, the longer that section has in the before the whole waveform we're basically making is retriggered. So the shorter we make everything, the faster it goes. Actually, and that's going fast enough to be audio range, so we could actually do some sort of interesting waveform generation with that. Anyway, but and also one of the things that we know in this setting is that the point of run, it's a type of cycling, and in that type of cycling, every note you play is going to have the same basically, the triggering is going to happen the same for every single one of the notes. The waveform is going to stay the same. So the same cycling envelope is going to be applied to all of the notes that you play in phase. So it'll all be happening at the same time. The waveforms, the pitch variations will be the same for every note. You'll notice I did not press those in rhythm so they would all line up. They're all just happening at the same time, and that is inherent in the run setting for the cycling envelope. So everything you play when you play a note is going to be the same. You'll notice also I pointed out that when we started, we were kind of in the hold function, because we start off on a steady note. We don't start off on a slope. Well, anyway, you can change that by going to Sound Edit and going down to Cycling Envelope and hitting Stage Order. And then it will give you different ways different stage combinations. So you can decide when the note starts. Okay, that one's starting off with hold. It starts with H. So for example, if you wanted this pitch variation not to come in until later, you have kind of your own delay function by setting it to hold. And then you'll get everything, you'll get the other stages happening. But we can decide that it starts with the rise. Or even the we can set it so that it starts with the rise or the hold, and the other functions are switched. So basically, you get to decide how this cycling envelope cycles, which is cool. Next, we're going to move on to the loop function, and the main difference between loop and run, which is a good question. They're both cycling, but in loop, there's a cycling envelope for each of the voices, which is to say there are 6 of them, and they all can be running independently. So when you press a note, it's going to make a difference because it's going to trigger at the beginning of the cycle for each of the notes, which means all of the notes, if they don't all start at the same time, are going to have their independent cycling through pitch, the way that we currently have it set. So unlike on run, when all of the variations, no matter when you press the note, all happened in phase, in this case, they're all going to be happening depending on when you hit the note. See, all of those pitch variations are independent of each other, but there's different types of triggering in this setting that we can mess around with. Like, for example, I just pressed them all at the same time, and they all went with the same time. So you can actually do that. Or independently. So we've been hearing kind of the poly keyboard setting. So if we go back out here to the functions, we can choose retrigger source. Right now we're on poly keyboard, which I just demonstrated, where each note you play, it triggers, when you play a note, it triggers the cycling envelope for that note, for one of the 6 notes. We can also change it to mono keyboard. Now in mono keyboard triggering, it re-triggers each time a new note is played. For all of the notes. So you're holding a note, that note that you held will re-trigger when the next note is played. And then you can hear both of those cycling. Both of those cycling envelopes for those notes are triggered simultaneously as the second note is held. So mono re-triggering means that you'll just get a re-triggering for all of the notes held whenever a new note is played. There. Legato keyboard. Legato operates like you'd imagine legato would. As long as a note is held, no new notes will re-trigger. But all of the subsequent notes will be at the point in the variation, in our case in pitch, that the cycling envelope is currently at, which you just heard. So like, listen, as I play these other notes, which are not starting the wave over, they are subject to wherever the wave is currently at in the frequency, which is how we have it set. So that's how legato works. And then we can also set it to LFO1 or LFO2. And then basically it will restart, irrespective of when you're playing, it will start whenever LFO1 or LFO2 tells it to. Which you can see. We have it set, LFO2. And if you get that restart going fast enough, you're actually creating a new waveform, an audio waveform, which there's a huge amount of possibility in there. As you control the restart of the cycling envelope, you can almost make it into an oscillator, which is amazing, but I'm not surprised because Arturia always does interesting things like that. Oh, there's one more function you can do. Let's back out of this. You can also go down to tempo sync, and you can have the cycling envelopes triggering happening in regard to the tempo, overall tempo of the MiniFreak, so it'll just restart. So if you want the cycling envelope to restart every time a beat comes because it's playing in a sequence of some sort, you can set it to do that too. So that is our cycling envelope, and this is really powerful because you can use it as an envelope, as your second envelope. Well, you can also use the LFO as an envelope, but we'll get to that. But the cycling envelope can be your second envelope, or it can be your second LFO. It's really super versatile, and you have the ability to shape the wave the way you want, to cause it to repeat the way that you want, to cause the repeating to be triggered in the way you want, and even to resequence some of the stages. So it is a very, very powerful tool. And that is the cycling envelope on the Arturia MiniFreak.